Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, Florida State, wrapping up fall camp. And it is about that time to predict the depth chart rolling into 2025. And I'll say two things right off the bat. Number one, it is very important for Florida State to get it right immediately. Now, there's a lot of programs that have the luxury of playing a couple of G5 teams to start out the year. So you have the opportunity to kind of extend some of these position battles into the season. That's not where Florida State is. You're opening up week one against Alabama. You got to get it right. You got to figure out who your best football players are, get them on the field against Alabama. Number two, I'll say this, going into fall camp, we had a ton of question marks in terms of what this depth chart was going to look like. I would say this, there seemed to have been a lot of separation on this Florida State team. I'm looking at this depth chart and say feel pretty dang good about predicting the two deep going into 2025, which is in a way different spot than where Florida State was 12 months ago. I don't think Florida State knew who their best football players were. And we figured out there just weren't enough good football players last year. There's a better sense of who your best players are going into 2025. And I think that's important, especially when you're looking to have some early season success. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Florida State fans, appreciate you guys. It's been really fun talking this football team. There's been a lot to talk about over the last couple of months. Brand new football team, brand new coaching staff. The amount of support's been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. Excuse me. We'll start at the quarterback position. Tommy's your quarterback one, and I'll say this, I'll continue to say it. I am intrigued in terms of what we heard from Tommy during fall camp. Didn't hear a ton about turnovers, didn't hear a ton about inaccuracies, and I ain't getting up here and saying Tommy Castellanos all of a sudden going to be a 70% completion percentage kind of guy. But to hear that the offense had some success, even though you probably couldn't really lean into Tommy's legs during fall camp because you got to keep him healthy, that intrigues me because this kid, like we said all year, he's at his best when the Bullets are live on Saturday afternoons. That's just when he plays, but he ain't a fall camp quarterback. And to hear that Florida State has had some success on the offensive side of the football, that intrigues me about what he can be early in 2025. Quarterback, too, that this is an intriguing storyline. Brock Glenn dealing with the injury kind of left the door open for Kevin Sperry. And Kevin Sperry sounds like he pounded that door down. I think Kevin Sperry might be your quarterback too going into 2025. And I'll say this, ideally, we don't see a ton of Kevin Sperry in meaningful moments in 2025. This kid could be a really good football player for Florida State in 2026. If you were to ask me 6-7 months ago, does Florida State need to grab another quarterback in the portal after the year? I probably would have answered yes. I don't think that's the case anymore with Kevin Sperry. I think they like Kevin Sperry a lot. He could be your starting quarterback going into 2026. Running back position, clear separation. I can't stress that enough. Usman Kroma and Gavin Sawchuk, I think, have come in during fall camp and have immediately asserted themselves as the best running backs in the room. We kind of had a feeling that was going to happen before fall camp. I feel like that's been all but kind of solidified during fall camp. Now, is Usman Kroma going to get the first carry of the season for Florida State? I don't know. I would be, at this point, stunned if he is not your leading ball carrier in 2025. And here's the thing that gives me the most confidence is he's doing everything right. Like we know he's a very gifted carrier of the football, but when it comes to pass protection, when it comes to the nuances of the position, for a kid that wasn't here in spring practice, it sounds like he has really came in and asserted himself as a freshman running back that can do everything you want. I think is a pretty clear top 3 running backs on this football team, with Jalen Lucas being that gadget guy that's going to get on the football field in some unique ways. Wide receiver position, I think there's been pretty clear separation here too. Like Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White, when they've been healthy, they've been your best 2 pass catchers, with Javon Boggs being your number 3, which I think is big. I think Florida State hit on Javon Boggs, and we needed a third wide receiver to step up in this room. We got that question answered emphatically during fall camp. I look at the top 3 wide receivers on this football team and say, this has a chance to be obviously better than last year, but it has a chance to be pretty dang good for Florida State in 2025. Tight end position, I think you'll see 2 tight ends play a lot, depending on what they want to do with Amari Williams. I think Randy Pittman, like, quietly has asserted himself as that do-it-all tight end that can do everything you want in this Florida State offense, whether it's inline block. I don't think the ceiling is super high as a pass catcher, but I think there's a pretty high floor. Now, what does Landon Thomas look like? That's the player that gives you the ceiling as a pass catcher in 2025. We'll see how much we see Landon Thomas. We'll see how much we see Amari Williams. Probably has a lot to do with what they can do in the inline run blocking department. Because we know Gus Malzahn wants to run the football, and if you're a tight end, it don't matter how good you are as a pass catcher. If you cannot provide value as a blocker, it's going to be hard to get on this football team or get on the field for this football team because of the emphasis we're going to see on the run game. I'm excited about Randy Pittman, kind of an under the radar pickup. Follow Gus Malzahn from UCF. Sounds like they like him a lot at that tight end position. Offensive line. We know what our starting five is going to look like. I think the biggest storyline of fall camp is Jacob Rizzi. It sounds like Jacob Rizzi can be in the 2 deep at a multitude of different positions. And my biggest concern is the depth of this offensive line. And so Jacob Rizzi being a guy that can play center, that can play guard, maybe even play tackle for you. That's the position he played in the Ivy Leagues before he came to Florida State. That's big for Florida State. Starting 5. And I don't think enough people realize this. It was so bad last year that if you're in the national media, you kind of just blindly assume that it's not going to get much better going into 2025. It's a brand new starting 5. I mean, the average weight of this offensive line is 325 pounds. They've played a combined 8,700 snaps. I don't know if you'll find a more experienced offensive line than what you see in Tallahassee. Now the storyline is there's a lot of names that are highlighted in red. Like these guys haven't played a ton of football together as a unit, but they've all played a lot of football, and they're all big and can move bodies off the line of scrimmage. How quickly does it come together for this unit? That's the question. If it comes together early and they stay healthy, you're going to see a monster improvement from this unit, and it's going to be huge because if Florida State can't run the football, Florida State's offense is going to struggle. You don't want to be relying on Tommy Castellanos to be a guy that needs to go out and throw for 3,500 yards because that's just not the kind of quarterback that he is. But there's some quiet confidence that this offensive line can be a little bit more of a weapon for Florida State than it was a liability last year. I think it's clear. Like that I feel comfortable about that being your starting lineup when we take the field week 1 against Alabama. Going to the defensive side of the football, this is when it gets a little bit murky. And it's not murky because we don't know who our best football players are. It's murky because there's a lot of different looks and a lot of moving parts to the Tony White defense. My biggest concern here is like we can talk about the 2 deep all we want. I do think there are more players on the defensive line that we trust as opposed to last year. This should be a pretty deep unit. My biggest question mark are, do you have your game wreckers? Do you have your Jared Verse? Do you have your Braden Fisk? Hey, Daryl Jackson feels massive for this Florida State defense. Can he be the game wrecker that we know he's capable of being? If he is, like that is probably the most important question you can ask about Florida State. Now, here's another thing that I am a little bit concerned about, especially with the injury to Kevin Wynn. I'm not sure how long Kevin Wynn's going to be out. What's your depth look like at the nose tackle position? Because to me, it was Daryl Jackson running with the ones, probably playing 40, maybe 50 snaps a game, and then Kevin Wynn probably playing 20. And that was probably what it looked like in terms of a depth standpoint at the nose tackle position. Without Kevin Wynn, and we don't know when Kevin Wynn's going to get back, but if he's not back for Alabama, that's pretty much the question I'm asking. Who is the guy that rotates in at that nose tackle position? Because there's not a ton of other obvious body types that can play nose in this 3-3-5 Tony White defense. Who steps up is probably the question, because I don't want to play Daryl Jackson 60 snaps a game. I think he's your best defensive lineman, but you want to get the best out of him. He's 330 pounds. You don't want to play him 60 snaps a game. Do we have some depth that we trust to rotate at that position? That's the question mark I have. How big is the drop off when Daryl Jackson comes off the field? How big is that drop off to your other nose? It is probably the biggest question I have. Off ball linebacker, I think Elijah Herring has cemented himself as that off ball backer that's not going to leave the football field, which is big because Florida State did not have that kind of linebacker last year. They didn't have a single linebacker that played over 500 snaps. They were just continuing to rotate them because the play wasn't all that good. Elijah Herring sounds like he's one of the leaders of this defense coming in through the portal. That's big. I think Omar Graham is probably going to be your other starter. And say this about Omar Graham, that there were a couple of players that actually played decent football last year that we didn't really talk about because all you could talk about was really the bad and the losses. Omar Graham at 5% missed tackle rate last year, really, really low. 16 run stops, was second on the team. I thought you saw the light start to flicker for Omar Graham. Can he take that step in 2025? Can he be your other off-ball linebacker? Because this position was such a problem for Florida State last year. We like what we've heard from Elijah Herring. We like what we've heard from Omar Graham. I'll say this. I think the coaching staff in terms of getting these backers ready way better than what we saw last year. That's a storyline. Earl Little's your rover. And he's another key to this defense. Like, how good can he be in this position in the Tony White defense? Because we are hearing glowing returns about Earl Little. Cornerbacks, Jeremiah Wilson's your cornerback 1. Jabril Rawls sounds like he's your cornerback 2 with Quandarius Jones, a guy that we trust at cornerback 3. Shamar Arnault could push to get on the football field as a true freshman at cornerback 4. I think you got 4 guys, definitely 3 guys that you trust at the boundary cornerback spot. That's a good thing. Safety position, the young cats, man. You look at Edwin Joseph, KJ Kirkland, I think they're probably going to be your starting safeties. Conrad Hussey got kicked off the team. Shaheem Brown sounds like he's running with the 2s. I think that's exciting for a lot of Florida State fans as well. Again, I feel like there's a pretty clear pecking order on both sides of the football for Florida State. On defense, you're going to see some more rotation because I think there's more players you trust, which is a good thing. Man, it's hard to know what to expect, but I have a pretty good feel for what the depth chart is going to look like. Now, how's it going to look on the football field? We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.